And this moment for Asians is really important because it's about how are we going to respond
Right.
to the social climate, because it's actually another moment by which we are being otherized,
Yep.
whereas the racial climate has now chosen to highlight us, right? So are we going to continue to prove our worthiness, right? Are we going to continue to prove like, hey, no, we're not the virus? Or are we going to say like, we're about done with you, like we're about done with you deciding when and where we're the enemy?
Mm-hmm.
It's our kind of political moment to determine who we're going to be and how we're going to respond to the racial violence. And I don't think it should be stop being violent to me.
Right.
It's more like and it's also, well, it's also how we're going to confront the racial violence. Right?
Right. Yeah. No, exactly. Connie, that's exactly what I was going to lead into. So I'm glad you brought it up yourself, because what I wanted to do in this episode was not to continue talking about the violence and the assaults. That's happening. We know that. Day in and day out, we're hearing about this and we're seeing it. We're reading about it. We're angry about it. We're frustrated. We have anxiety about it. But how are we going to take this moment? And I said this last week in my episode, and that's why I was calling out the Asian American community, saying we need to start speaking up more. You need to be more courageous about speaking up about this, and not just saying you're pissed, but thinking about like, okay, how are we going to take this moment? And I actually drew the parallel with Vincent Chin in the 80s. That was a galvanizing moment for the Asian community to come together and to say, enough is enough. You are not going to treat us this way and blame us for something we had nothing to do with. And that really created a movement that was sustained. So now, what are we willing to do? What are we willing to do to make this a sustainable movement to then say, enough? Okay, you cannot treat us this way because we are an important community. We have important voices and we are influential. We have to empower ourselves that way, or else if we don't feel that way and if we don't voice that, why the hell would the rest of the world and this country feel that way about us? Why? They're not going to fight the fight for us. We have to fight the fight.
We
right?
actually, there are multiple steps to it, I think. One is that we have to own our histories, our long legacies of resistance, right?
Yes.
So my family came here. I was born in Oakland. My family came here as Vietnamese war refugees, meaning they survived histories of war.
Right.
And so we have to reclaim that history for ourselves, right? Our families struggled to be here. Right. And here we're talking about the United States in particular, but also this is indigenous people's land. That's not something to be frivolous around, right? Yeah. AAPI, our organization has, we have support from indigenous communities because we remember whose land we're on. Mm-hmm. Because as Vietnamese indigenous folks, we were displaced from our land and brought over here. So I bring that up because we have to, one, remember our histories and then remember what it means to be in solidarity with other communities of color. Yes. So we didn't fight Chin on our own, right?
That's right.
Historically, we have historically worked with other communities of color. And when other communities of color call us out, it's a really painful thing when folks are saying, where were you when Black Lives Matter happened, right? Yep. Or where were you? And the question is, where were you?
Right? Exactly. And that is what's happening. I have seen those comments from the African American community during this time, some showing support and grateful for that, but others, maybe rightfully so, saying, hey, how does it feel? And where were you guys when this was happening? And that is a valid point with communities of color, especially with the Asian community. The Asian community often does ignore other challenges that other communities of color are facing because they think, oh, it's not us. So we're just going to turn a blind eye or not really get involved. Because unfortunately, sometimes that's also the Asian way, right? Traditionally, of just not getting involved. Well, guess what? it's karma coming back. It's, you have to show this kind of solidarity. Like you're saying, during Vincent Chin, communities of color did rally. They did rally together. And that was the beauty of that movement.
We always kind of need each other, right? And so I've been thinking about, the anti-war movements, the anti-Vietnam War movements. It took communities of color who were here in the United States to fight against that end, right? So people have been in international solidarity for a long time. I bring that up because it's not just that we haven't spoken up or been in alliances or in alignment with other communities of color. We haven't checked our own racism, right? Our own colorism within our own communities.
Yep.
So going back, one, it's reclaiming our histories of resistance. Two, it is remembering to be in solidarity with other communities of color. And I also take into account that these history books don't teach other communities of the histories of violence against us.
Yes.
So they don't. We're newcomers here. To be honest, we may be generations here and decades here, but we're new here. So when I go around and I talk to other communities of color who are not in social justice or who are not in the schools, and I remind them of like the violence we've experienced, people are like, really? That happened to you?
Yep.
We didn't know.
And I think that's why it always gives me some solace and some hope when I do see members of other communities of color coming forward, especially now during what we're going through right now, speaking up and saying this is not right, and really showing their support. And this is what we need to be doing. And again, going back to why we started this conversation, in terms of finding solutions, it does start with that. It does start with connecting with each other and speaking up so that people do become more aware of what's really going on. So then they are therefore more willing to show support and to speak up and to, put out a post or whatever it is, it does make a difference. And that's why I'm trying to call people out saying, listen, you might not think it's a big deal, but for you to put out a little tweet or an Instagram post, showing support or at least calling this out, it does make a difference. It does.
Like more recently, Alicia Garza, who's the founder of Black Lives Matter, issued a tweet that said she had our backs. At our Congresswoman Barbara Lee's office is consistently participating in our work. Tarana Burke, who's the founder of #MeToo, has, she was a part of our conference and said, we're in solidarity with you. Yeah. In fact, she's donated so much to our organization. And I'm just thinking about, we need to highlight the ways that other communities are supporting us